I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on the Spotlight Network, we're exploring the story of resilience, courage, and survival with a terrific author. His name is Miguel de la Rocha, and he has penned a powerful book. It is called F.A.T.E, F-A-T-E, My Future After Traumatic Events. From being declared dead at birth to surviving cancer as a teen and enduring the harrowing experiences he suffered as a soldier, Miguel shares an extraordinary journey of perseverance and hope. His powerful memoir offers inspiration for anyone facing overwhelming odds, reminding us that the future is what we fight for. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. And be sure to download the Spotlight Network TV app, streaming on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV. Miguel, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Well, thank you, Logan, for having me. Truly, it's an honor to be here with you.
It's an honor having you on the show, sir. What a way to come into this world, being declared
Right?
dead, right? But you survived and you're here to tell the story, of course. So tell the story. What happened to you at birth?
So I was already 3 weeks late coming into this world, and because back in the early 70s, they really weren't inducing labor if you were a couple days late or whatever.
Mm,
So my mom suffered through that for 3 weeks
mm.
with me in there, and as I came out, I was already dead. The cord was wrapped around my neck 3 times. My head was completely blue. I wasn't responding, wasn't breathing, and obviously they were able to bring me back. And that was at the very first moment of life. So yeah, it was just a stage for what was going to happen for the
Uh,
rest of my life.
Amazing. Yeah, very, very scary. And yeah, it was setting up this drama of a life. As a teenager, then you're diagnosed with cancer.
Yeah.
Tell us how that happened. What were your symptoms and what kind of impact did that have on you and your family?
Well, honestly, I was 15 when I was first diagnosed with it, and I had gone through it 3 times, 2 more times after that.
Mm.
It was intestinal cancer, it was hereditary, and there's a 50-50 chance of getting it. But, when you're that young, at least back in those days when you were that young, cancer was rare for kids. And it
Yeah.
was just like, something that it really didn't hit me. And in fact, I was even making jokes about it because the doctor says, well, it's rare form of cancer, and it was rare to have, a kid like me have that kind of cancer so early in life. And I was like, oh, really? And I was joking with the doctor, like, does that mean I'm going to make the news? And
That's
of
great.
course,
Well, that's a
the
good
doctor,
spirit to have, to be excited about your battle. And I guess that's the will you need to survive, to sustain yourself through, did you have to go through chemo or radiation or surgery or all of the above?
no, luckily I did not have to go through chemo. I did have to go through several surgeries though.
Yeah.
And that's just been my mindset is, that make the most out of it and to enjoy the moment and try to not get bogged down too much in what's happening, but just my personality and everything was always, I guess that was my coping mechanism and still is about, making jokes and making people laugh and, you know, uh, facing overwhelming odds in that kind of mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. Attitude means a lot. It gets you through the tough times, no doubt, and makes it easier for the people around you. Your parents are suffering too when you're suffering. In some ways, maybe even more. I mean, there's nothing worse than having a child that is ill. Um, as you grew older, though, you joined the military despite these physical challenges or illnesses and episodes when you were younger. Tell us about why you decided to serve in the military and what that experience was like.
Well, I've always had three dreams when I was a kid. I
Mhm.
always wanted to be G.I. Joe because that was such a
Mhm.
popular cartoon show growing up in the 70s and 80s. I always wanted to be like a sheriff of the Old West, so I was always, into law enforcement as well. And I would even practice doing my quick draws. And so, but actually came in handy when I was in the law enforcement academy. So they gave me the Wyatt Earp Award for having the quickest draw and the most accurate. So that was pretty cool.
That's
Um,
amazing.
and so I was able to do that for a couple years. But it was when I was going through it, it was after a very devastating loss in my life from mi abuelita de mi corazón, which is my dearest, precious grandmother,
Mm,
when she passed away when I was, I think, 16. And it, yeah, it was brutal. And so at the time, I was in high school, just going to high school for a year or two in Northern California. So we moved back to San Diego, where my parents are originally from,
mm,
and to take care of my grandfather. And so I was able to move in with my grandfather to be there for him for that. But unfortunately, back in those days, there was no real statewide standard for graduating high school because half the classes that I took in Northern California, which would have only be uh, let me as a senior having two classes a day
mm,
for my senior year, which was going to be a total cake year, right? Because you just think, oh,
mm.
I only got two classes today, and then woo, I'm off, right?
Mm.
Uh, but then when I moved to San Diego, it was completely different, and they told me half the courses that I was took in Northern California didn't apply in Southern California. So all of a sudden, I had to take six full classes. I was doing sports, and I had to take three night classes on top of that just to graduate on time. But come fourth quarter of my senior year, the guidance counselor called me into his office, says, well, you're not going to graduate on time. I was like, well, what the hell? I said, I'm doing what you told me to do. He says, well, you're exceeding the limit allowed for night classes. I'm like, well, that's what you told me to take. And so I was really pissed off and rebellious me. I said, you know what? I'm 18. Screw you. I'm going to the military. And that was actually the last year that that you were able to get into the military without a GED.
Wow. Amazing. Amazing. Were you deployed overseas? What was your experience like once you were in the military?
Yeah, it was really funny because that was right at the time we just were finishing up basic training um, in December. And in December is when we had Operation Just Cause, where we invaded Panama.
Hmm.
And so we were actually on standby for that. Luckily, we didn't have to go through that. But, uh, you know, but a year later, we were called up for Desert Shield, so
Hmm.
the first Iraq War. And so at 19 years old, I entered into combat and entered into war zone.
Amazing. Amazing. That must have been quite an experience being part of Operation Desert Shield. Um, Tell us what are the standout memories from that era in your life?
Well, some good stuff that, man, I was so cocky at that time. When everybody was entering in the plane, and I'm just a little E nothing, right?
Mhm.
Uh, Everybody was entering into the plane, and it was one of those huge, I guess, 747, 757, whatever, that had that big nose and the recliner seats and captains, and had like the third sections, like with the stairs and everything.
Mhm.
So all the regular soldiers were going to the right. Well, I'm like, nobody's telling us where to sit. So I go to the left. So there I am in the nose of the plane with all the big captain chairs, plenty of space, recliners, all that stuff with like the colonel, the general, and the top brass. And they let me stay for the trip, which really surprised me. But this was also the time where like Vanilla Ice was really heavy, and we were dancing and stuff. So I was partying with the flight attendants, having a great time, dancing and stuff like that. And then they conspired. The flight attendants conspired when we switched planes. Then I'll put on fresh lipstick, and I had kiss marks all over my head, all over my face, and everything else. So that earned me the nickname Hollywood when I was in there. So that was my call sign from then.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and that was the fun part. But once we were getting close and starting to land, that's when reality really hit.
Yeah.
And again, 19 years old. We had missiles that were shot up at our plane, so we landed hot, which means like it was lights out, total blackout. Um, it was chaos. It was
Mm.
crazy. But the good thing is that being trained for combat back in the 80s and early 90s was that it prepared us for war because when you've got three drill sergeants screaming in your face, calling you all kinds of names and stuff like that, it's preparing you to accept and undergo chaos so that you
Mm.
can tune out what isn't relevant and you can focus on the directions that your NCOs are trying to get you to do so that you can complete the mission.
Right.
Because if bombs are blowing up next to you and all kinds of chaos and bullets are flying over your head and everything else, there's going to be chaos.
Yeah.
And you have to keep a mindset and focus on the objective and the mission. And that's why it was so good of how they trained us back then, and because that training kicked in. So
Yeah.
even though chaos was going off and missiles were going everywhere, air raid sirens, all that stuff, and we were running everywhere, the drill sergeants, or not the drill sergeants, but the NCOs, were telling us what to do and screaming out orders and everything else. And that training allowed me to tune into what my NCOs were saying and directing me to do. And I was able to tune out everything else at that time and follow their instructions.
Yeah.
So that was a critical moment of how the training from that era, from drill sergeants that went through Vietnam, prepared us for that kind of combat
Yeah.
and
Um,
situation. But yeah, I was scared as hell.
yeah, I don't
Absolutely.
blame you. You had reason to be. It's a life and death situation, no doubt, but you were familiar with those, unfortunately, by that time, or fortunately, because it changed your perspective on things. Um, what do you hope readers take away from your book?
Well, the whole reason why I wrote the book is because every hour of every day, at least one veteran commits suicide.
Mm.
And back in 4th of July of 2014, I, or yeah, I believe it's 2014. I was almost one of those.
Mm.
So I was at a homeless program. I was one of the first ones that went through a new homeless program in San Diego, and I'm very thankful for them opening up that kind of program. And it was the 4th of July because it was right there at the Bay of San Diego. It was right next to MCRD, and they had three or four different sets of fireworks going off. So they
Mm.
had three or four different fireworks shows going off, all within a very close proximity. Because you had SeaWorld, you had the airport, you had the Padres baseball stadium, and then, of course, back then, I think San Diego, the Chargers were still playing in San Diego. So you had that fireworks show going on. So you had multiple shows going on at the same time. And the way the wind was blowing, it was blowing all uh, the smoke from the powder
Mm.
um, blowing in on us. And
Mm.
literally, if you hold your hand out in front of you, I couldn't see my hand. So it was
Wow.
very drowning in the smoke, the gray, the black. And then with the concussion, the earth was shaking from all the concussion blasts of the fireworks going off, for so many of them going off at the same, close proximity.
Mm.
It literally was like being back in combat. And it was going back. And what was really weird is that a portal opened up in front of me. And
Mm.
on the other side of the portal, in the midst of all this black and gray smoke going on, it was like I could just walk through it and I would be back in combat, back in the war.
Yeah.
And that freaked me out. And so I had to basically escape from all the smoke and everything that was going on. And it was at that moment, and that's why I call it my darkest day,
Mm.
is because it was like I was ready to give up.
Yeah.
All of a sudden everything hit me again where, all the injuries that I sustained in the war, all the head traumas, all the PTSD, just everything, the severe violence from childhood that I experienced, to like everything that was going on, to losing my career in law enforcement that I
Mm,
loved, to losing my on-air personality radio show that I was doing that I loved
mm,
because of the effects of the traumatic brain injury I suffered. And so I lost basically everything. And uh, right before going into that program, I was homeless for about a year, and I was just
mm.
traveling, living out of my vehicle, going from shelter to shelter. Because unfortunately, although they have great programs for a lot of vets, the biggest one, Wounded Warrior Project, only helps vets that were post 9/11. And because
Right.
I was pre 9/11, there was no program for me to get help. So so that's why I ended up cruising back from Florida, where I was a corrections officer for the state of Florida,
Mm.
and lost my career from a knee injury, that I just scooted on and eventually made it back to San Diego for that program.
Yeah. Well, we're
And
glad you
so
made it back to that program. We're glad that program's helped. We're glad that you're with us today and you're turning everything around. Life is a redemption story, no doubt, right? We have our ups and we have our downs.
exactly.
And I'm glad you were able to
But
get out of that very, very dark spot. What were you going to say?
yeah, there's just one critical point that I really like to make, because it's what switched everything around for me. Is that for the way one way that I was looking to end it all, I was gonna the highway was right there, cars doing 70 miles an hour plus, and I got to the sidewalk and I was ready to find some big vehicle to jump in front of, so it just be done. Um, but as I was doing that, I started getting the images of what was going to happen.
Mm,
And I started thinking about, okay, so I'm going to do this, but then what about the people inside the vehicle?
right.
It's like you've got like a mother and young kids, going through there, and all of a sudden they just see my face splat on their windshield, and they,
Mm.
hear the loud bang and everything else. That's going to traumatize them for life,
Yeah.
and I was just like, there's no way, with who I am and how I am, that I'm going to put somebody innocent like that to go through
Yeah.
such traumatic events, that it was like, I'm not going to do that. I
Yeah.
don't want to put that kind of trauma onto somebody else when I'm the one struggling. So I walked back to the barracks where I was staying, and I just, hunkered down and um, curled up basically in a ball and just sat up on my bed. And
Mm,
next thing I know, I'm waking up the next morning and it's a beautiful, perfect, Southern
yeah.
California summer day. And
Exactly.
so that changed everything for me, because then all of a sudden it was like, you know what, I need to help others, and I have a new opportunity. This is a new moment and a new, uh, oh, can't think of that word right now, but it's a new opportunity to continue and to have a greater life, to have a better life, and to have a future after those traumatic events. And that's pretty much where I
Absolutely.
came up with the title of the acronym, FATE, Future After Traumatic Events.
Well, we're glad you do have a future after traumatic events. We're glad that you had that great heart where you didn't want to put someone else in harm's way. It in turn saved your life and let you live to a new day and to see that the sun does rise, the sun is beautiful. There is hope, there is light out there. And we need to all focus on the light, those beautiful days that are always coming. Even if tomorrow is gloomy, the next day is coming that'll be rosy, no doubt. This book is terrific, folks. It is called Fate, A Future After Traumatic Events. It is an unforgettable memoir about facing death, enduring trauma, and finding the strength to shape a powerful future. Thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight, Miguel.
Thank you for being here, and I do encourage everybody to get it. I am also the 2024 International Impact Book Award winner, the 2025 nominee for Author of the Year,
Awesome.
and the 2024 Featured Author of the Year, and my book was the 2024 Recommended Book of the Year.
Wonderful. And it's recommended by the Spotlight Network as well. You're deserving of all the accolades you're receiving. Thanks so much for your time today. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time, this time until next time on Spotlight.